Welcome to Evansville Podcast. My name is Jason Burton. Thanks for listening. One favor I would like to ask before getting into the show today is that if you like what we're doing here at the podcast, please tell someone else about the podcast. Help out our little show. We really would like to grow our audience a little more. So if you could share a post or retweet a thing, or just if you know someone that likes podcasts, just let them know about us and what we're doing here. And we'd really appreciate it. So recently I got a chance to sit down with Mark Cirino to talk about Hidden Hemingway, which is a book that he has helped co-author. It's about Hemingway's birthplace, and it's a coffee table book. Very cool. Please check it out. We talk about Hemingway's the style and process of writing, kind of what draws Mark to Hemingway. And also, Mark has a book event coming up September 10th in the evening at Barnes & Noble in Evansville. So if you're around, please check it out. It should be very enlightening and a lot of stuff going on the 10th. So there's no excuse to not have a great time in Evansville. So let's just get into it. All right. We had to get Teddy Roosevelt in there.
Oh,
so.
Super.
Yeah.
Fan of Hemingway was a fan. Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Why are you a fan of Teddy Roosevelt?
That quote that's on there about the actually doing stuff instead of just criticizing is a lot of people like that quote, I guess. But yeah, but it was like, oh yeah, all right, I probably should use it. I probably should look at that every once in a while.
There,
yeah, it's like, oh okay, well, yeah, but slowly we'll get actual things in here. But now I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. You said it was Cirino.
Exactly.
Cirino, like
Cirino.
Right. Okay.
Mark Cirino. Exactly. Perfect. That's perfect. Mark
Great.
Cirino.
Yeah, because I was like, I wonder, is it Cirino?
Yeah,
and I'm sure you get that.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
Yeah,
but
you know how in Italian CI is G, like Al Pacino.
Yeah.
So
okay.
No, if anyone calls him Al Pacino, you're done.
No. Well, no. And so you have a good Al Pacino impression then, or no? Okay. Thought maybe we could.
I'm one of the
uncover
few,
some things.
One of the few Italian Americans who can't do Al Pacino.
All right. And we're here to talk about Hemingway with one M.
Hemingway with one M, right?
As I've learned, Hidden Hemingway is a book that you guys have done, and you. It's co-author. You have two other authors on here?
I do, yes.
And they're not in Evansville, though, right?
No. In fact, Rob Elder I used to work for the Chicago Tribune.
Okay.
And he is a native Oak Parker. So he was the one who had this idea of going into the Oak Park archives.
Okay.
And exploiting it for sort of investigative purposes. Yeah.
So how does that work? Oh, because traditionally, I've never really written with anyone. If I've ever written, just thinking back in school and stuff, it's like, that seems to would be hard.
No question about it. It's, I would say, obviously there's pros and cons, and I think maybe what you look for in a friend, you wouldn't necessarily look for in a collaborator, right?
Okay.
But the best thing I can say about collaborators, and certainly in this book, was that we each have different strengths. And so Rob, for instance, is a journalist. He understands layout. This book has a lot of illustrations.
Yeah.
So he understands how to tell a story through images. I am a Hemingway scholar, for better or for worse. And so I'm coming at it from a more academic angle. Rob had a more journalistic impulse, and Aaron is more of a prose writer. So we all three of us sort of collaborated, and we did 99% of our collaboration over the phone. And no, it wasn't some hostile, creative difficulty.
Right.
Everything was great. We all wanted the book to turn out as great as it could be. And when there was a problem, we knew which of the three were most apt to be able to handle it. And it was a pleasure. We talk all the time, and we're all friends. So
okay, well that helps. That helps.
We're not writing another book together, but it was the first one. This one was fine, right? Exactly.
Yeah, and so your normal job, or is it, if you can call it normal, I guess, is what?
I teach literature at the University of Evansville.
Okay,
and starting my 9th year. We just had our first day of classes. So I work in the English department, and I generally specialize in American literature.
Okay.
Of which Hemingway is an important part.
Kind of a big deal.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe one question that I definitely wanted to ask you, because I've read it both ways, but there's a quote that he gets, I'm sure he gets a lot of quotes attributed to him, but one is write drunk, edit sober. Did he actually say that? Did we know, or do you even?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. And there's a whole cottage industry now that the internet has spiked up. Like, all you have to do, writing is easy. All you have to do is sit at a typewriter and bleed. He never said that. He never said 6-word short story for sale, baby shoes never worn.
Yeah.
Never said that.
Never said that.
And most pertinent to our book, the great quote that's attributed to him about his hometown of Oak Park is, he supposedly said Oak Park was a place of wide lawns and narrow minds, which is a terrific quote, except he didn't say it. And isn't that, it's too bad. And
somebody's getting hosed on all these quotes.
All you have to do is say, oh, as Hemingway said, and it's not. But when you go on Twitter or the internet and you see that, oh, Hemingway said this, Hemingway said that, and they're following advice that Hemingway supposedly said.
Right.
Hemingway, I mean, we could spend the whole time talking about Hemingway and alcohol, because obviously he was a famous enjoyer of alcohol, and also a famous abuser of alcohol. And for most of Hemingway's career, not all, but for most of his career, he was extremely disciplined about writing sober. He would get up at the crack of dawn or even before. He would go and work until maybe 11:30, and then he would be drunk for the rest of the day. He'd go fishing and drink. He'd go hunting and drink. And so alcohol was certainly an enormous part of his day, but he was meticulous from the vast majority of his career of writing sober. And so that canard, write drunk, that is not an accurate representation of who Hemingway was. Now, later in Hemingway's life, he's like, well, maybe I'll just bring a glass or a bottle into the office, and you can see the effects.
Yeah. I've used that quote for podcasts because we talked about you record drunk and edit sober, but that makes the editing process so terrible.
Yeah, be good to yourself.
Right, exactly. It's so much more work.
Do a good job the first time too. Another thing, talking about Hemingway, Hemingway was a wonderful editor of his own work. And I've been one of the luckiest things that I've gone to Boston, where the John F. Kennedy Library has all of Hemingway's papers, all of his manuscripts. And part of what Hidden Hemingway, the book, is about is that Hemingway saved everything. Yeah. And one thing he saved was first drafts, so you could actually see. And so, yes, he's sitting in a Paris cafe. Maybe he had a little drink or a coffee.
Sure.
But you can see how he would change one word, or he would turn a long sentence into 2 short sentences. You can see the emergence of Hemingway's famous style. People say, oh, Hemingway's style, write short sentences. Well, if it were that easy, everybody would do it. Right. It's really quite a specific style. And if you look at his manuscript papers, you can see how it evolved from the rough cut to the final product.
Okay. And you've written some other, or been involved with the other projects. I don't know if you were fully the only author on those, or
some yes, some no.
Okay.
The most recent book, another book that came out this summer, is called Reading Hemingway's Across the River and Into the Trees. Across the River and Into the Trees is probably Hemingway's most maligned novel from 1950. And I had to do a book for the Reading Hemingway series from Kent State University Press, which is an interesting type of series because it forces the writer to do a line-by-line explication of a novel. So if you've ever seen, for instance, biblical exegesis, where you read the biblical passage, but then you also see commentary on every phrase or line by line. That's essentially what I did with Hemingway, treating a Hemingway novel like it was holy writ. And it really teaches you all the strands that go into a novel. It teaches you how intense you have to be an interpreter of a novel, even if it's not A Farewell to Arms or The Sun Also Rises or The Old Man and the Sea. What was your background reading Hemingway? Did you have to read him in high school?
I did not. I was thinking about this. I think I've not read much at all. I think one book, and I was trying to think. I was like, I don't even remember which one it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long time ago. So for whatever reason, that whole Hemingway thing skipped over me.
Well, I think it did me too until I sought it out.
Okay.
Certainly, I was not. I think what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that you have to read The Old Man and the Sea sometimes in high school. Mm-hmm. It's not a very complicated novel, and it's short, so people tend to assign it. Right? Yeah, it's 120 pages. I could do that. And like Of Mice and Men is short. The Old Man and the Sea is short. But no, it was not on our required reading list for high school.
Not at all. Which it's interesting because it's so popular. I mean, if you like name an American author from a long time ago, that's probably the one that people would mention. So
I think it's safe to say that when Hemingway died, he was the most famous writer in the world, and certainly the most famous American writer in the world. He won the Nobel Prize in 1954, and he died in 1961. So that last part of his career, Old Man and the Sea was 1952.
Okay.
He really was, an icon. He was a titan of American literature.
So what's your favorite then? Is that like asking favorite children?
Well, I know what my favorite child is, but I'm not.
Okay.
I
do too. I know mine. We have.
That's absolutely not true. We're going to edit this. We're going to edit that out. My favorite Hemingway book is the next one that I'm about to teach, or the next one that I'm about to write about.
Okay.
I get very excited.
Yeah.
Usually, let's say when I want to put Hemingway in the syllabus, sometimes I avoid it. Like this semester, I'm teaching a course in the American novel.
Okay.
It's like, you know what? Let's slalom around Hemingway. We don't really need to see him. But then when I say, oh, you know what? I haven't done A Farewell to Arms in a long time. That's going to be great. Or The Sun Also Rises, or The Old Man and the Sea, or For Whom the Bell Tolls. So it's whatever one it's like a rotation. And then, this one now my enthusiasm is newly up for this one. Or if I want to write a piece about something, I throw myself into that and I get excited. For whatever reason, I'm thinking about through UE, there's something called the continuing education, where they have people from the community come in, usually older folks who, not for a degree, but just to come and learn from the professors. And so this semester, or it's not really a semester, I think it's a 6-week session, I'm teaching a course called From Fitzgerald to Hemingway, where we'll read The Great Gatsby, and then we'll read The Old Man, we'll read The Sun Also Rises. So we'll read those two novels, we'll discuss the relationship between the books and the relationship between Fitzgerald and Hemingway, which of course is kind of a notorious literary relationship. Okay. And I think it's a great idea. It's for the community to stop by and I've always wanted to learn. It's like kind of like yourself. If you weren't so busy, you might say.
Recently I'm making myself read more again, just because.
Oh, is that
it's
right?
I'm like, I need to start reading again. So I may actually pick up a Hemingway next, I think.
When you read, are you reading fiction or nonfiction?
Usually a mix. Like I just finished Disrupted, which is a nonfiction story about a guy that he's an older gentleman that works at a startup and deals with all of whatever that entails, right? And then he ends up going to he writes for TV show Silicon Valley. So it was like, I'm a fan of that too. So I'm curious, and it was a really good book. But then most of the time, if I want to just kind of not think about my normal, because that one's like actually affecting my my life. But for a normal day to day, I'll try to read like something different that I don't think about. So like a crime novel,
escape,
or just pure. Like I don't even care if it's good. I just want, most of the time, just wanted to disengage.
I find my reading, and I have to really try to read in addition to my work and my preparation for school, is I try to read the holes in my education, where I look back and I say, it's embarrassing. I'm an American literature professor. I've never read this book or this book. So
list of shame.
It's
kind
all
of stuff.
Exactly, and that's actually such a good thing. Like, if you write down, like, what are the 5 novels that you're most embarrassed never having read? And so I've made those lists, and get it down to 4, and then another one pops up. So it's a lifelong project, right?
Turns out there's a lot of books.
They keep writing them, and
what is the deal?
Someone was saying like, "Oh, you're this whole notion of being well read." And I think that's impossible, because I think when you read a book, you realize you really need to read 20 more. Every book sends you down some kind of tributary or path that just convinces you that you're only scratching the surface. So if you like an author, you got to read 10 more of those books. It's never ending, but it's a good sort of maelstrom to be in.
Yeah, it's not a bad problem. Speaking of a lot of books, though, I mean, Hemingway seems like, he's very popular, so there's a lot of stuff written about him. How do you find the new stuff that maybe hasn't been uncovered yet? Because that seems like that would be hard.
No, that's a good question. And I think I can answer that. You'd probably have to answer that on a book-by-book basis. But if we want to talk about Hidden Hemingway, the book that is just out, this was a simple act of curiosity on Rob Elder's part, where he went around their Hemingway archives of Oak Park are actually in several different places. There's the birthplace home, there's the Hemingway Museum, there's the library. And so Rob Elder went from place to place, and then he basically said, why isn't there a book about this? So it's just the act of saying, I've never seen all of this collated, synthesized, and organized into a narrative. And the guy said, well, just do it. And that's where that came from. So it's just a matter of saying, I've never seen this before, or I have an idea that I don't think too many people have touched on before. And so it's such a logical book, because Hemingway's stuff is just there for the taking. And so it was really just an act of going through it, seeing what was there, and trying to find the story within the chaos of it. If you look through this book, you see that Hemingway never threw anything away.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
A lot in there. Letters, documents, bullfighting tickets, ship things, dental x-rays. There's absolutely, and childhood assignments, baby pictures. So all of this stuff, if you give it some sort of scholarly context, if you tell people exactly what they're looking at, a part of Hemingway really comes alive that you might not be used to.
So that process, it's interesting to me that finding that narrative process, I guess, out of like you said, you've got a bunch of material. So is that part of the collaboration then, is like, what's our story? What are we seeing here? That kind of thing.
Exactly. And you might shoot it around the room and say, well, this fascinates me. There's no two people who would put all these materials together the same way.
Right.
What might interest you might not interest someone else. So what we really tried to do was show the range of relics that were there. We tried to go, oh, well, you got to talk about the family. You got to talk about Oak Park. You got to talk about Hemingway as a kid. And then you kind of follow Hemingway through all the various stages of his life. Hemingway's quite interesting if you think about it. Like, I can just ask you, what place do you associate with Hemingway?
Yeah, I think of the sea,
right? Cuba,
right?
Key
Or
West,
bullfighting, or
Key
something.
West, Spain. Some people might say Africa or Italy.
Yeah,
Paris. You saw Midnight in Paris, so you associate him with it.
Yeah,
I think you could probably go through 8 or 9 places before you say, he's really from Oak Park, Illinois.
Right.
And I think one of the main reasons, well, there's probably 2 reasons. Number one is when he got older, he took off, like lots of people, where they feel a little bit stifled in a small town.
Sure, yeah.
And they say, well, I'm out of here. And the second thing might be that he never really wrote about Oak Park. If you think about Hemingway's writing career, The Sun Also Rises takes place in Paris and Spain, or France and Spain. Farewell to Arms takes place in Italy and Switzerland. For Whom the Bell Tolls takes place in Spain. The Old Man and the Sea takes place in Cuba.
Right.
Across the River and Into the Trees takes place in Italy. So he never really focused a narrative in an American setting. Now, sometimes he would write a short story that took place in northern Michigan, so the northernmost tip of America, or Key West, the southernmost tip. But he never really focused on Oak Park. He always says, I gave it a miss.
Yeah. Huh.
And that's why this is kind of it seems to be a new association. Like, well,
Okay.
Oak Park is the home of Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote Tarzan.
Okay.
Frank Lloyd Wright, probably the most
Sure.
famous architect in
Yeah.
American, and Hemingway. So there are three sort of favorite sons of
Man,
of
so they were just killing it. Wow.
Since then, not so much. No,
We don't know. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good Hall of Fame.
It's good.
Yeah. So, as I want to, before I forget, I want to make sure we do talk about this. You at Barnes and Noble on September 10th. There's a book event for this, right?
Exactly. Yes. So I'll be appearing at Barnes and Noble, in Evansville,
Yeah.
on Green River Road. I'll be appearing there at 7:00 on September 10th, and I think what I'll do is I'll show a few slides from the book,
Cool.
if they have the capability. And
Yeah.
what I really like to do is talk about Hemingway or answer questions about Hemingway and sign some books and say hello to some people. And I'm really looking forward to that event.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
To say that I made the Barnes & Noble
Right,
in
there you
Evansville,
go,
I've
man.
made it. Yeah.
You've made it. You're done. No, you don't have to write it anymore. So, as a scholar of Hemingway, is there like an overall theme that you latch onto whenever you're just from book to book?
Well, what I've seemed to be settling on is Hemingway in Italy. And I'm particularly interested in... So Hemingway went to Italy 2 major times. He went during World War I when he was a kid, and he got blown up on the Italian front. But then he went back, and I'm interested in when he went back. And when he went back, he was world famous. He was an aristocrat. He was wealthy. He was hanging around all the elite of Italy, northern Italy. He stayed in Venice at the Gritty Palace, so he's really famous. And I'm really interested in that phase of his life. So I tend to write about Hemingway in Italy and his Italian works. But it was just a couple weeks ago, there was a Hemingway conference in Oak Park. And you can see everybody has their own little Hemingway, like someone's in Kansas City. Hemingway in Kansas City. Hemingway spent a little time in Kansas City. I'm the Hemingway in Kansas City guy. I'm the Hemingway in ecology guy.
Okay.
I am Hemingway in feminism. But I seem to be... I can't say exclusively, but I'm really fascinated by how Hemingway associated with Italy, how his works were received there, his Italian associates. That really excites me.
Yeah. So, what is it about Hemingway that draws all these people that or maybe you can't speak for them, but like, what is it that's so fascinating about him?
My sense about that is that his persona is so outsized. It's such a dominating, out there personality. It's almost cartoonish. And I would say he's at least partly responsible for how cartoonish,
Sure.
big game hunter,
Right.
boxer, brawler, womanizer, boozer, all this stuff. And so that's his persona. And there's something really exciting about that, killing lions and marlins and fighting people, cursing people. There's something we respond to about that most novelists don't do that. The Hemingway's not the kind of guy who's just going to sit up in his room and churn out masterpieces. He had adventures, and you have the picture of Theodore Roosevelt on your wall. When he was a kid, the turn of the 20th century, he was like, yes, Theodore Roosevelt. He was a soldier. He was a hunter, an outdoorsman. He lived with great gusto. And so in many ways, Teddy Roosevelt, like many boys in the beginning of the 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt was a model for how Hemingway lived his life.
Yeah.
Now, I would just feel remiss if I didn't say that one of the things that does, though, if you actually read the work, he is way more sensitive and thoughtful and subtle.
Yeah.
He just didn't always like to advertise that part of him.
Right. It doesn't sell as many books.
I was like, his characters actually, they might have been to war, or they might be bullfighters, or they might even be gangsters, but there is a softness and a sensitivity to them that is not apparent always at the first reading. But Hemingway put it in there. That's one of the delights of reading Hemingway, is that you have to kind of penetrate the surface to get the full meaning. Hemingway depended on readers being active and investigative.
Yeah. So, from what I remember from reading, it felt like I was less concerned about the plot, but it was more like the people. They were very well just thought out, I guess, and they had their nuances, and that was what was interesting to me. That's
an excellent way of putting it. I remember a couple of times teaching The Sun Also Rises, and I asked my class, what's the plot of The Sun Also Rises?
I think that is the one I read.
Because some people, it's like a collection of, we went to this bar, bullfight, bar, scuffle, fishing.
Right.
What was like, well, what is going on? And if you really look, and you have to really look, you say like, when he says this, that kind of, it's there, but it's very, very subtle. And you're absolutely right that it's not, you said, I read sometimes a crime novel. Well, crime novels depend on, you have to follow the plot. And if you lose the plot of a crime novel, you're like, well, wait, who is this character and what was his relationship that you're Hemingway novels are quite different, where he trusts the reader to listen to the dialogue without attribution. So it wouldn't be, yes, Jason said with a scowl on his face. It would be yes. And then he would depend on the reader to go, I bet Jason's not very happy. I bet he looks concerned. And so there are these clues. It's on the surface is much less busy than, let's say, a Faulkner novel or a F. Scott Fitzgerald novel, Virginia Woolf or James Joyce. It's much more apparently calm, but it's roiling underneath. And the creative reader just has to burrow down a little bit to get underneath. Yeah.
So are there any modern authors that you are drawn towards at this point, or do you get time to even check it out?
My weakness is novels that have been written in the last 25 years, which I've read very few, but my immediate answer to your question is Cormac McCarthy.
Okay.
I think is great. He wrote The Road, No Country for Old Men, All the Pretty Horses.
Gotcha, okay.
And he's really powerful, really powerful. In a weird way, he takes Hemingway and Faulkner and triangulates them into his own thing out in the West, and it's mighty. He's fantastic. I hope he wins the Nobel Prize in the next few years. Wow. An American hasn't won in a long time, so it would be nice to have. And he's
Come on, what are we doing?
Yeah, no. It's Cormac is great. Have you ever seen any of his movies?
I've seen No Country for Old Men. Yeah. And I'm sure, like most people, it's mad at the end.
Yeah, but it's a shocking.
But it is shocking. Yeah. It's like, wait, because it's so jarring, because we're trained to think a certain way, and then it does it differently, and it's hard to wrap my head around.
And the book is great.
I've heard that.
The actual novel is great. So Cormac McCarthy is excellent.
All right. Yeah, I was trying to think, like, I don't get to read a lot of fiction, but Chuck Klosterman, who usually writes nonfiction, he wrote, it was more character driven than plot driven on the Downtown Owl, I believe is what it was called. And so I was thinking, it's like just the conversations that they have. It's like, I don't even know. First time you read it, it's like, what are we even doing? Right. Because it's like, this has nothing to do with anything. But it's like Tarantino, right? The conversation has a meaning. It's just you don't know what it is yet until you probably watch it a few times.
No, that's exactly right. And suddenly there's some people, like, after you read a Hemingway dialogue, then you read another writer's dialogue, it feels so false because they're sort of forcing the plot through their speech. They're saying, but what do you mean about blah, blah, blah? And it's like, oh, come on. People don't really talk like that.
Yeah.
So it's this natural thing. And so you're sacrificing the ease of reading, because it is easier when it's right in your face about what's happening, but you're also getting a lot of more, it's far more natural and more powerful. And you just have to do a little bit more work. With a Hemingway novel, you have to do a little bit more work.
Yeah, and that is, I know the things I've read where the details aren't, the extraneous details are out there, and your brain makes up for it, and you're more engaged that way. So maybe that's probably one of the reasons people are drawn towards him, right? Because
Right.
they get to like imagine it how they want to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, if you watch an actor in like a film from the 1930s, there's a lot of histrionics.
Oh gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
You say, well, that's melodramatic. That's really, he's acting as if he's on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get close-ups and you can almost see what an actor is thinking without the actor. You know, you don't have to bawl when, pretend you're crying when you're actually crying. All you have to do is see the actor in thought.
Right.
And it's a more modern way of depicting art is to be minimal, reveal as little as possible. And I think one of the things I would connect that to is Hemingway's depiction of people at war. Because if you've ever talked to a soldier or a veteran and you say, hey, you ask them a question about the war, it's very, very seldom that they're like, oh, well, let me tell you. Here's how it was.
They do not want to talk about it.
They'll talk in like quick phrases. Right. They'll be dismissive. They'll speak in generalities or facts. They're not really going to get into the emotions. Right. And I know I'm painting with a broad stroke, but this is generally...
I've had that same experience, yeah.
And Hemingway replicates that because the real question that Hemingway asks in much of his fiction is, how do you tell a story that is not pleasant to tell? Because it takes away a lot from the drama of telling a story. If you say, oh, well, let me tell you this amazing thing that happened, blah, 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 and then there was this huge disaster, and then blah, blah. It's like, no. You have to, through being terse and suggestive and oblique, it gains in power, right? It gains in power. And that's the great gamble that Hemingway is taking, that by not revealing the emotion and not revealing excess, you're saying, wow, what he gives me, I better do a lot with that.
Interesting. So what's my Hemingway book, my assignment? What am I reading next?
I would start with the short stories.
Okay.
And there's a short story called The Killers. Okay. It's 5 or 6 pages.
I can do that.
And all I'm going to ask from you is about a 2-page essay.
Okay, sure.
And due on my desk in a couple of days.
I'm not feeling well.
Gee, I've never heard that before, right. Jason.
I don't know. I was going to ask if I passed or failed this.
No, what I would do is I would read The Killers and then watch the Burt Lancaster movie.
Okay.
And see how they connect. The Killers is the short story is what we've just been talking about to an extreme. Is Hemingway truncating to just a few pages some incredibly poignant or dramatic moment. So,
interesting.
Hope you like his short stories.
Yeah, it's certainly doable. I can't say it's too long, right?
No.
Well, thanks, Mark, for coming over, and this is it's a cool book to just kind of. You don't have to like read it cover to cover, right? This is one that you just there's so many pictures all over the place.
It's a coffee table book. You look through it, and you read it at your own pace.
Yeah.
At Barnes & Noble, I'll throw up a couple of pictures just to talk about them.
Yeah.
But as we said at the beginning of this conversation, different pictures will appeal to different people depending on your interests.
Yep. I know certain things caught my eye more than it's like, oh, whoa, what is this?
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah, I had no idea that. I mean, yeah, it's just fascinating to see it's always weird to see people like from their childhood and growing up, and it's just, it's like, oh, they're a real person.
And then you open up this book and you say, oh, there's Ernest Hemingway in girls' clothes. That's
like, oh,
yeah.
All right.
That explains a lot.
There's okay. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Well, thanks so much for having me here, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, anytime I will. Part 2, we'll more Hemingway talk, right?
Look forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for listening. Please check out evansvillepodcast.com for show notes, links to things we talked about in this episode. And please share this episode with someone that you think would enjoy it. And once again, good job, everybody.